Welcome to our Shared Beginnings series on National Adoption Month. My name is Michaela Montie. I am the co-founder and executive director of Shared Beginnings. And today on our Adoptees Unfiltered series, we have the enormous privilege of interviewing one of our board members, Kacie Alverson. Kacie and I have known each other for 8-ish years, something about that, around in there. Do you want to give people a little bit of background on how we met?
Yeah. So we were working at Walmart, and I saw these posters all around the home office, and it was talking about National Adoption Month. And I was like, what? Who's putting this on? I have to get in touch with them. And April Scott was like, oh, it's Michaela. Let me introduce you. And so I reached out to you and asked you how I could be a part of the conversation. Like, what did you need? And so then, we started going back and forth on the Walmart program. But I think after that, we became pretty close.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So that initial event kicked off like a series of 3 or 4 consecutive years where you helped me, and we're super involved in diversity and inclusion events where we raised awareness around adoptive families, foster families, expectant moms, and their choice in adoption. And then that all culminated for us in 2018 when they announced the benefits change.
Yeah, which was super exciting. Being able to impact such a large corporation as Walmart and get adoption benefits. That's huge.
It was huge. Yeah. And I think you were one of the guest speakers every single year. So I still remember that very first year because your adoptive parents came, and they were so sweet and they're super proud of you and just beaming and excited to be able to participate. So that was super fun.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about your origin story. Obviously, you're an adoptee, which is why you're here as a guest. But let's talk a bit about Kacie, where you're born.
Yeah.
What was your origin story?
Yeah. So I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. My biological mother was very young. And so she decided, in order to give me the best opportunities, the best chance at a, fulfilled life, she was going to put me up for adoption. And so after she gave birth, she immediately signed her rights away. And so I went into the foster care system in Little Rock. And my parents, they have been trying for children for years, and they were told that they couldn't have kids. And so they had already 3.5 years before had adopted my older brother, Tyler.
Okay.
Yes. And he was from Korea. And so they were not going to do another international adoption because that took so much time, and it was so up and down. But they got him through the orphanage in Korea, and so they were like, we want to continue expanding our family. And so they found the foster care system in Little Rock. And so once I was born, my mother signed her rights away. I was in the foster care system for, I think it's 10 days or so until her rights are officially signed away.
Yeah.
And then they can start the adoption process. And so I was in the system for a little bit, and I actually have a ton of pictures of my foster mom and her children, and just all of them surrounding me. I have them in photo albums at my house, and it's great to look back on. But so as a baby, I was officially adopted by Rick and Gail Alverson, and I had my older brother. He was a super proud older brother. And then they wanted to continue adding on to their family. So I have a little brother who also came through the same foster care family and everything. Yeah, we have the same caseworker. I still text her to this day.
Aww.
So it's really, really cool. But
that is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then they had a
Yeah. So,
surprise.
Yep. Surprise. 10 years after me, my mother found out she was pregnant. So at 44 years old, she had her one and only biological child, my little sister, Riley.
Yeah.
And that like completed our family. So we have a ton of different races in our family, and it's the best. Like my little sister was like the missing puzzle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you went to a foster family immediately and stayed with them for how long?
It was like 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were still really, really young once your parents stepped in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned your older brother is from Korea. Mm-hmm. Your brother after you is also Black.
Yes.
And then your sister's Caucasian or white.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about, and you and I have talked about this a lot, but tell me a bit about how growing up your parents supported you as individuals within your own kind of racial and cultural identities.
Yeah. So like one of the biggest things, my parents always wanted us to be proud of who we are, where we came from. And so they tried to indoctrinate like our different cultures within each of us and like get us books and take us to different places and do different activities like pertaining to, our culture. And one of my fondest memories is like Christmas. Like we always had like an Asian Santa, Black Santas, white Santas, like full representation. And then for me, when I was younger, my mother would take me to the hair salon because she didn't know how to do my hair and she was determined to learn. And so she just like, she walked into a salon. My mother is bold. She walked into a salon and she said, "Hey, I need help. Would somebody take the time to teach me and show me how to do my daughter's hair?"
Yeah.
And she continued to take me to that hair salon. I still go to the same person to this day. So over 25 years of doing my hair. And all of the ladies that got their hair done in the salons, like she made friends with them. And so she would just like reach out to them and make sure that they were all there for me. And they still are. There's plenty of people that, message me and they're like, well, I have a daughter now. We'll take Bella so you can go do this, and this. And like, we would love to babysit. And it's like, she really did build a community for me. And she did that with all of us.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. When you looked kind of cross-culturally, did you enjoy learning like about Korean culture and things like that? How is that balance for you?
Yeah.
Because we struggle. That's something we struggle with within my own family and my kids because we're a multiracial, multi-ethnic family. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that balance is a little bit, I think, hard to walk, honestly.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, what was that like?
I mean, I thought everything was so interesting. There's a big Hmong community here. And so my brother would go to like the New Year and like the celebrations and stuff just because like it was, something he could be a part of. And I always wanted to join, but I was like, I don't want to like infringe on, his thing. But yeah, I think all of us were super excited to see each other find things that we were, passionate about and excited about.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I did just mention, one of my daughters is also Black. And so for the last 8 years, you've been one of my many sounding boards to be like, am I doing this right? Is this okay? Can we wear matching Juneteenth shirts? Like I want her to be proud of her race and her culture.
Right.
And to like own that history. What specifically, what advice would you give white parents with Black kids or even just minority kids in general? What did you see your parents do that was like really impactful for you?
And I like you do a great job at this. It's like not ignoring that they are a different culture and a different race and embracing it. A lot of people will say like, you know, I don't see color. I don't see that you're different from me. And no, you should. You should see that your daughter is a young Black woman, and you should embrace that with her by taking her to do these things and showing her how to love her hair. And so that's what I would tell other parents is like, see them for who they are and embrace it. Like learn who they are and who they will become, because like once they turn 18 and get out into the world and go to college, the world is not going to see them as just your child, and like they're not going to not see their race, right? So you have to teach them to love themselves, because like when they get out in the real world, that's what matters most. Yeah,
and I love that as you've grown up, you've also immersed yourself into the Black culture here in NWA. You've helped lead several things. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in that space?
Yeah. So there's a couple of nonprofits that I've been on the board of, and just working with the different communities and making sure that we are supporting them and helping out the minorities succeed and empower themselves. Because, you know, it's not easy being Black in America. And so helping our community, whether it's finances, like reading, haircuts, food, all of the things, and then just providing a safe space for like people to just be people and enjoy themselves. And so different like career fairs, like craft fairs, like all the things, so that they can enjoy themselves and help like lift up each other.
Yeah. I definitely view you as one of the local champions here in Northwest Arkansas. Like whenever I want to know what's going on within that community, I can usually just refer to your social pages and I'm like, oh, we need to go to this.
Yeah.
But you're also an amazing proponent for like other small businesses and Black owned businesses and artists. And I've just seen you be involved in so many different things here in Northwest Arkansas that it's really helped educate me. So I very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
So you started a search. We're going to go back to your adoption piece, your adoption story. You started a search for your biological parents, like pretty close to when you turned 18, right?
So 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, my caseworker told me I could start filling out the paperwork to basically unlock my records and allow my biological mother to contact me. And so on my 18th birthday, like everything was like stamped, sealed, ready to go. And I did get in contact with her. We wrote letters to each other. And that went on for a couple of months, but stopped. It was probably about November whenever it stopped. It was just a little too overwhelming for her. And I understood, but I didn't at the, like, you know, you're like, I get it. It's a lot of emotions, but I also don't get it because I'm your child. Like, you should want to talk to me. Right. So at that point, I kind of like sat there and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then holiday, there's deals. And so Ancestry DNA had a deal of like 50% off. And so I did Ancestry DNA. And I did that when I was 18. And then almost 3 years ago, it'll be 3 years in December 4th. On Ancestry DNA one day, it was a Friday. I remember it was a Friday. I got a message and it was, "Hey, I looks like we have some like DNA. We're a DNA match. Who are you?" I was actually preparing for an interview. So I looked at it and I ignored it because I was like, all I've seen on Ancestry is like third, fourth, fifth cousins, like. and they all messaged me and they're like, who do you belong to? Like, who are you? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like,
that's why I'm here.
Yeah, you should know. So I was just kind of like, blew it off. And then I finished my interview, and then I was sitting there, and it was, end of the day, end of the week. And I was like, okay, let me look at this. Like, who is this person? And I looked and I was like, oh my goodness, it's my father. And I had no expectations of actually meeting him or finding him on Ancestry DNA. I had only heard about who my biological mother was. And so I was searching for her family. I heard that I had a half sister. So I was just hoping that one day, like, my half sister would pop on there. And so seeing his message, I like immediately like started crying and like dropped. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, what do I say? And so I responded and I was like, hey, it looks like you're my father. Nice to meet you. And he did not know what to say. He was like, what? Like, is this a joke? Like, can you, like, he sent me his email, he sent me his phone number, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. So I texted him and I was like, hey, this is Kacie. And so we texted for a little bit. And then we ended up FaceTiming. It was the next day, like super early, like 4 or 5 a.m. because I had a half brother who was like 1 year old, and he was up with him. And so I FaceTimed him, and so I then he added my half sister who lives in Germany. And so I like in moments I just had like all of this family that I had no idea that even existed.
Yeah.
So that was absolutely incredible. And within 5 days, he had drove down to Bentonville, and there's a video on my Instagram of us meeting, and it was like so much anxiety. I think one of my friends, my best friend Kendra, she has a video of me like taking a shot of vodka. I was so nervous. I was like, I don't know what he's gonna think of me.
Yeah.
And then we had lunch and realized, he was only 3 hours away, and he had been for quite some time.
Oh my goodness.
And so, within 3 years, we have gone to Croatia. We've gone on a Disney cruise to the Bahamas and the Grand Caymans and done so many things. And I've met so many aunts and cousins and uncles, and it's been absolutely incredible. And then oh man.
I know, I can sense the emotion, but I have goosebumps over here because we also have to give him a shout out. He's watching today.
He is.
So hi, Kacie's dad. Probably both dads actually, but
within a year of like this whirlwind of emotions and finding my family, I got pregnant.
Yeah.
So like my family just kept expanding, and it was absolutely like the best year of my life.
That is so exciting. Yeah, I remember like watching some of your journey and us even talking about that, because when we were at Walmart was when you had tried to reach out to your mom again, I think, and she's still kind of not ready. So talk about just like the process for you. Because I know we've talked a little bit about it, almost felt like re-rejection again. So I think then when you found your dad and there were such open arms.
Yeah, it was like I became a new person.
Yeah.
I had been disappointed many times from her rejection. But it took me a little bit to realize that I wasn't being rejected.
Yeah.
She was just trying to protect herself. And so it took some time for me to understand that. But I like being able to like spend time with him, it really has like, I don't know, like a weight has lifted off my shoulders, and I just like, I feel loved. Yeah. I can give love now. Like I've always been a happy person, but now I'm just even more happy.
Yeah. Well, I thought some of the sweetest memories were pictures that you had posted of like both your dads together, like with your daughter.
Yes.
So can you talk about how like that dynamic has kind of evolved for you? Because I'm sure adoptive parents looking at it or even birth parents looking at it are like, how is this going to work? What does this relationship look like? Can you give them a little bit of insight into that?
Man, I mean, everybody gets along together. So like my sisters like follow each other on Instagram. They talk to each other, wish each other happy birthday. My dad and little brother and sister have came down here and they've spent time with my entire family. They've met my grandparents too. Like my grandparents ask about them all the time. And now that Bella is here, like you see my dad's back and forth on Facebook, like she can get whatever she wants. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like this girl is so spoiled. Like, no, she does not understand the word no. But like everybody has like a great dynamic. They're like, we're all one big family. And nobody feels like anybody's like encroaching on their space. Like everybody just wants to give love and be family.
Yeah, there's openness there and like acceptance and meeting each other where they're at.
Yeah.
So with other adoptees that I've followed, like as you walked your reunification journey, what was that perception with your other siblings who were adopted? Were they curious about their biological families? Did that open up certain things?
Yeah. So my older brother who was adopted from Korea, he unfortunately can't find his biological parents. There's with how like records are kept in Korea and all that stuff, like it's just not possible. But he got his passport and he was like, one day I'm going to go and I'm going to go. And he's like, I may not, find family, but I'm going to go and learn about who I am and where I came from. And then my younger brother, he decided to try again and he found his biological family. So he's gone and spent holidays with them. He's gone and spent weekends with them. And it's actually like super cool to watch him find his like I'm kind of like reliving it through him. And it's like everybody is super supportive as well for him too. And I'm actually friends with one of his uncles on Facebook. Well, he did Ancestry DNA too. So he followed my steps. Like he did Ancestry and then he was too scared to reach out to people. He was a little nervous, but he found some really close relatives. So I was like, send me their names. And I did it for him. So I reached out and I was like, hey, you're, this close in relation to my brother. Do you know anything about who he is? Here's his like original name that was on the birth certificate. Yeah. And he was like, I think I know who his father is. Yeah. And he was like, I think it's one of my brothers. And I forget like how many brothers he had, but he was like, I think it's one of my brothers. And so he went through the brothers and because I knew his mother's first name. She didn't put a last name on there. But the name that she picked was very close to the father's name. Yeah. And so we like we mathed it out and figured out who it was.
Wow. It's so fun and like invigorating. You kind of turn into a little bit of like a private investigator. Yeah. And I know on the shared beginning side, we've been able to help in that way too, connecting adoptive family back with biological family members. And it's just such an awesome thing to see because that they only like the positive out of it is that adoptee will benefit long term. Right. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of point out in your journey and your brother's journey is that only for about the last decade in Arkansas have adoptees been able to access their original birth records. So before that, it was like completely closed and you would have never been able to even start this journey.
Right. I had to petition the courts to unseal my records at 18. And then once I petitioned the courts, they had to reach out to my birth mother and ask her for permission. And she denied it. But when she wrote me a letter, she was like, here's some information about you.
Oh,
here's what I was going to name you, and like all of that stuff. But you're right. Within the last few years, they did change the laws. And so that's also what helped me track down my little brother's biological family. So we filled out the documents. And so that's how I got his mother's name, his birth name. And so that was how we were able to like reach out to his uncle and tell him, here's what he was going to be named. Here's the woman. This is like, we only have her first name. So that really helped us in his search. And then I actually petitioned and got my records. But before I got my records, I reached out once again to my biological mother, and I let her know, the laws have changed. And I basically asked for her permission. I was like, I would like to know, like more information about my adoption and all of that stuff. And I like, out of the kindness of my heart, like I wanted to ask your permission, even though I don't need it.
Right.
And I told her that I was pregnant at the time. I told her, I was like, I am pregnant. Like you have a grandchild coming, and I want to have all of this for her so she can also know like where she comes from. Yeah. And that basically opened the door with our communication. She felt like she could trust me. And so we talk about once a month now, which is really cool.
Awesome. So talk to me a little bit about like why being able to have access to your original file matters for adoptees.
It's just like knowing, like I had gotten letters, and they said, you from my mother, and it said like, this is what I was going to name you and all this stuff. And so I got that when I was 16 from her. It was on my birthday. She had wrote a letter to my caseworker, and my caseworker had delivered it to my family. And so I was like, sitting here thinking, man, like I was a baby doe, for almost a month. Like I didn't have a name and all this stuff. And then getting those records, like she actually did have a birth certificate for me. She did put my name on there. And so that really meant a lot. I actually have it tattooed on me because it means so much to me that I did have a name, and just knowing, she did all of those things for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something super important that we at Shared Beginnings advocate for, is adoptees to be able to have access to their original birth certificate. Because again, I think general perception has been, within adoption, birth parents don't care, or they're choosing this because they don't care. Right. And it's very much absolutely the opposite. Right. And generally there is so much thought put into, this is what I would want to name this child. This is what I want for this child, right? Like it takes a lot of forethought for a mom or dad to walk that through. So your dad, your biological dad, didn't know about you at all, right?
No, he had no idea, which is why his messages on Ancestry DNA were just like shocked. And I mean, I think for like, even now, he still says some things. He's just like, he's absolutely blown away that he has me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That is so crazy. So, I mean, that's a whole nother thing that we'll have to get into later, is birth father rights. But so people, when you're out and about, I think, at least within our family, because we look differently, people say ridiculous, crazy things.
Always.
So what is something that like stood out to you while you were growing up with your adoptive family that maybe someone said to you? How did your adoptive parents handle that? How would you?
Honestly, I only remember one instance, and it wasn't my parents. It was my great aunt that said something. But I do remember getting like stares and people saying like, you're quite the bunch. And my parents are being like, yeah, yes, we are. But I remember my great aunt lived in Harrison, Arkansas, which is notorious for racism. And I remember being at the church and someone staring and being like, why is this kid here? And my aunt checked them with the quickness. She did. And so like I remember that, but I like all the other ones, it was like, you know, you're kind of used to it. Growing up, just like getting the stares, and you're a kid, you're just like, whatever, like this is my life.
Yeah.
I will say as I got older, that's when my parents started having more reactions. Because, you know, people look at kids as more like innocent. But teenagers are kind of a threat.
Yeah.
And so I remember shopping with my mom at the mall and being followed by the store like associates. And I remember her turning around and being like, why are you following us? And them just being like, oh, just seeing if you need something. And she's like, you're not following anybody else. And so she like checked them once, and then when they continued to do it, she was like, "No, you're following because of my daughter." And she was like, "We have money." Like you see those in the movies, like we have money. We have. Yeah, she was one of those parents.
Awesome.
Yes, and my mom is like 5'4", small woman, but mighty.
She's super spunky. Even from day one when I met her, she like so much personality.
Oh yeah. So she would check people, and I'd just be like, yeah, my mom. So like there was those instances as like a teenager, and then once I became more of an adult, it wasn't more of like people following me. It was the comments. So I bought my first car that I ever bought was a Mercedes.
Of course, this is Kacie. Like you once you get to know Kacie, it's go big or go home. That's it.
Always.
I think Bella already has her first Mercedes.
She has
like
a pink one.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yes. Yeah. Go big or go home. So I was like, I know what I want my first car to be. Went to the dealership. I had been working like crazy and saved up all my money. And so I was like, Dad, you have to come with me. You have to like inspect this car and make sure that it's a good one. And you have to go with me so I can drive it around and everything. And he was like, okay. And so we spent that whole time. And then at the end, whenever we're paying, the guy goes, so are you buying this for your little girlfriend? And my dad was like, no, my daughter makes enough money. She's buying it for herself. And the guy he didn't say anything else.
Yep.
And there was a couple other times where people were like, oh, your girlfriend. He was like, no, my daughter. And now he like very proud grandfather. Yeah. Very proud. Walks around with Bella and people will be like, oh, who's this? He's like, it's my granddaughter. This is my granddaughter. Like, yeah. Lets everybody know.
Yep. I think the biggest, well, and I mean, you can tell me, but I feel like one of the biggest ways that I can show up for my kids is having those answers ready and just being very confident.
Yep.
And not feeling like I owe anyone an explanation.
Right. Yeah. And nobody, like, my parents never felt like they need, oh, you know, this is my adopted child and all this. No, this is my child.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my kiddos just changed schools this year. And so all of their little friend groups and things like that are still getting used to like me coming and picking them up. So even yesterday or 2 days ago when I had to go pick up my daughter, her little friend was like, that's your mom? So I still have to like round out my well-played answer back to kiddos, but usually it's just like, yeah, she's my daughter. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like as a kid, nobody they noticed that I was a different color, but they didn't understand.
Yeah.
Mind you, you know, we didn't have social media. We barely had
Right.
internet. But I remember at 8 years old, us all being at the lake and hanging out for the day, and then everybody like packing into the car at the end. And my best friend, my childhood best friend, I remember her looking at me and like looking at like my arm and then putting her arm next to, and she was like, "We were out in the sun for the same time." And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "But how are you so tan?" And I was like, "Natalie, I'm Black." And she was like, "I know, but how am I not?" And I was just like, "Oh." And I remember her mom like looking back, and she was like, "Oh, Natalie, we have to have a conversation."
Kids are really funny. And there's a difference, right, between that like realization journey versus like those preconceived like prejudices that we oftentimes can get from adults or others out in public. So you have mentioned multiple times about Bella.
Mm-hmm.
She just turned 1.
Yep.
How has becoming a mom yourself kind of impacted or evolved your view of both your biological and adoptive parents?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'll start with the less emotional one.
Sounds good.
So for my adoptive parents, choosing to raise somebody else's child and go through all of the sleepless nights and the tantrums and like everything that I'm going through now, I'm just like, man, like you chose this multiple times. Like you had no idea what you were getting yourself into because you don't know, like people write, about themselves and like, either mental health and all this stuff, but you truly have no idea what you're getting yourself into. And they're signing up for that. And I'm just like, you are incredible. Same to you. You're incredible for signing up to parent on purpose and help these children. And so, I already had like high, views of people who adopted and fostered, but now it's just like, man, y'all are doing a lot. And sometimes I lay there at night and I'm like, oh man, like, I'm barely getting any time for myself and, all these things and all these emotions. And I'm just like, I can't imagine doing it on the other side. So I my views have increased for people who adopt and foster. Yeah. And for my mother, I actually, so you emailed me these questions. And so like last night I was like, I saw these questions and I was like, oh, I know what my answer is going to be for that one. Like, going through parenting. And
single parenting too.
Yes.
So like, again, like completely different level.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Like truly no time. Right. Like I have nobody to tag in. So it's just me. Yeah. But like to that point, like I was up this morning, I was thinking about it and I was like, I could have chosen the other route because I was not in a safe relationship with her father. And I've had to make some very difficult decisions to keep ourselves safe. Yeah. And so then with that realization, I actually called my mother this morning. Oh. And I was like, I forgive you. I've said some hurtful things. And I understand now. You were doing what was best to make sure that I had the best life. Yeah. And you couldn't give it to me. And that's okay. And I'm okay now. And I would do anything to make sure my daughter was as well off as possible, as safe as possible. And I've done that. I've made some very difficult decisions. And now I understand she made a difficult decision. Yeah. But she did what was best for me. Yeah. And I told her that, and she was like, over 30 years ago, I was not in the best space. And I knew that this was the hardest decision that I will ever make in my life. But she was like, I'm so glad that you understand, but it's also okay if you don't. because I still love you. Yeah. And that conversation this morning was just, it was great.
That's good. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad that you've gotten there, and I really pray and hope that my kiddos will kind of be able to get to that stage as well. But I think in both venues with your biological mom and biological dad, like the story has been so different, and the relationship has progressed at a different pace. But in the same sense, they and you have both like always held space for each other.
Right.
And I think that's what is super important for probably adoptees to understand, is that, you know, no matter the circumstances or the reasons why, it's not that their birth parents haven't held space for them.
Right.
You know, it's a bit different when you get into full-fledged foster care adoptions where parents had no choice and rights were terminated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's extremely hard too. But I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's so awesome. And awesome that you were even able to like reach her on a Friday morning.
Oh yeah, no, we have each other's phone numbers, and she's kind of like me. Like she gets up early in the morning to just like reflect and like figure out how to attack her day. So we're very similar. It's funny. I'm similar to my father too, but in like different ways.
Yeah.
It's really cool. But yeah, I'm able to contact both of them on the phone.
That is so awesome. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you kind of covered this. But from the perspective of being a single mom, so Shared Beginnings does multiple things to just try to support moms in need. We have a hospital labor and delivery bag program, and all of our local hospitals have been stocked with free go bags for moms, any mom who needs it, with no information. It's just
just all the supplies that they need.
Yeah. Because we kept getting calls from hospitals saying, "Oh my gosh, this mom has nothing, and she's here, and she's in labor." And what advice or thoughts would you provide to an expectant mom that's considering her parenting options?
I mean, I think like the biggest like thing as a mother being pregnant is like, I'd have no idea what to expect. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And whether you're a single mom or not, that feeling is across everybody. Yeah. So like don't like discount yourself just because of that like feeling, because everybody has it. And it's okay to ask for help. I think that was one of my biggest things. I didn't want to ask anybody for help. I didn't want anybody to know what I was going through. Right. And once I did, I felt so much better, and I was like, why didn't I ask for help sooner? So it's okay to ask for help and let people know that you've chosen to parent and you're going to parent by yourself, and it's doable. Get yourself a community behind you.
Right. I was going to say, I think that's the biggest part that you've mentioned a lot. And even before we started recording, just about like your tribe and like the hairdressers or ladies at the salon who you've met and developed friendships with, who are able to like step in and help with Bella and just give you some mommy reprieve.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important. So last question, what do you think people's biggest misperceptions are of adoptees? And what would you tell younger adoptees as just like advice for where you are now, looking back at that pre-18-year-old?
Yeah. A lot of people think once they like the kids that are in the system and that are waiting to be adopted are all going to have problems. all the kids have problems.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know a single kid without problems.
Right, like all kids have problems. Like regardless if you have your kid or adopt your kid, like there's going to be sleepless nights. There's going to be tantrums. So I wouldn't discount the kids in the system just because you think that they're going to come with like all of these, a mountain of issues that you wouldn't have to deal with if you had your own. So that would be like my biggest thing is that people they have that misconception of children in the system. For adoptees, I would say like, just be who you are. I think I spent so much time trying to figure out who I was. And I felt like I had to like become a doctor, become a lawyer, like do all these different things to show that I was worth something to my parents. And I should have just been just like happy and like living in the moment. I mean, I know that's hard to like say, like, you know, just be happy, but like just be okay with it, with who you are and where you're at in life. Like you still have time to like figure out your journey. I feel like I rushed mine. I spent like 16 to 20, like just like trying to figure out who I was. And it really put me in like a very low mental spot. And I wish I would have just been like, you know what, if I find my biological parents, then I do. And if I don't, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I should just be like, you know, living life. I tell people this a lot, like time is the one thing that we spend and we can't get back. So we should enjoy it while we have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. And I just really appreciate our friendship and you always being there to bounce the things off of, so that even though I voluntarily chose to become a parent, I do not think I understood what that was going to mean either.
Yeah.
So I think anybody who's newbie, who's not a parent, no matter how you become one, you're going to learn a lot.
Oh, yeah. You'll learn a lot about parenting. You're going to learn a lot about yourself and on that journey, too.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kacie.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.